when it comes down to doing things like we have various trades that we've seen go by the wayside. When it comes down to being a master whip maker, Bill Millowick is a master whip maker. What denotes a master whip maker, Bill?
Well, I don't know. I suppose the fact that I served my apprenticeship, and I don't think there'd be many whip makers left that have served their apprenticeship. In those days, it was a trade, the same as it was a saddler or a collar maker or whatever, and you served your trade. But I think all those old fellas now that served their trade, I think they'd all be gone.
When you say serving your trade, how long was the trade?
Well, the trade was 5 years, but I didn't serve 5 years. I served 4, because the chappie that I was apprenticed to, he got crook, and he was an alcoholic, the poor devil, and he was a top bloke and a top tradesman.
Well,
but he was hooked up on on alcohol, and it killed him. He was only about 45 or something when he died.
When we talk about the where did you do your trade?
Up at R.M. Williams. Norm Torsney was working for R.M. Williams. He was up there making whips, and I went up there one day and took a whip up that I'd made, and he said, oh, do you want to be a tradesman? And I said, yes, I wouldn't mind, and that's where it all started. And actually, I didn't work for R.M. Williams. I worked for Norm, like I was Norm's apprentice, and he paid me, we always worked piecework. It was all piecework. It was you only got paid for what you'd done. When Norm gave up, well, RM asked me to go on, which I did, and that's how it all turned out. But Norm was he was a good bloke and a good tradesman, but he's just a bit sad there.
Well, we talked about the when you say piecework, how many whips a day did you have to make?
We had to make 4 thongs. That's the lash part. We had to make 4 thongs a day. You had to pick up a skin and trim it, cut your belly, cut your whip, plait your belly, plait your whip in 2 hours.
In 2 hours?
2 hours. Yeah, and if you couldn't do that, you weren't making money.
How much money did you make?
Well, you didn't make it. Well, them days, I suppose I thought I was going pretty good, and I suppose I was. But it wasn't. You didn't make a fortune out of it, but you were getting. Well, by the time I'd done me 3 years, I could make a whip as good as Norm and as fast as Norm. I was making a quid then, but you had to not only make a good whip, but you had to be able to make it quick. And Norm kept saying to me, like I'd say to Norm, "That's not a bad whip, Norm." "Yeah," he'd say, "that's all right. That's a good whip, but you're still too slow. You'll starve."
When you say good whip, what denotes a good whip?
Well, well shaped. Well platted, everything about it good, and then you could say, well, that's a good whip. But those days there was a lot of whip makers about. One of the top whip makers in them days, and I think myself he was the best whip maker Australia ever seen, was a fella called Cecil Henderson, and he was over interstate. And I never met the fella, but I seen all his whips and whatever, and I think he was the best whip maker that I'd ever seen anyway.
What type of whip did you make?
We made every whip that was a whip. We made riding whips, trotting whips, dressage whips, bullock driving whips. Any whip that was a whip, we made it.
Well, when it comes down to like bull whips, what are bull whips?
bullwhips are the American version of the Stockwhip. They have the handle and lash all in one. They don't have a separate handle and lash. We made hundreds. I made hundreds of bullwhips, and they're all right. But to me, they're not a practical thing, because if you're a stockman, I mean, you've got your whip on your shoulder or on your arm or whatever, and you can carry it and hold it. But with a bullwhip, it's stuck in your hand all the time. You know, it won't hang anywhere or anything. But they're great for lion tamers and circus people and whip cracking experts and them sort of things.
What about shot whips? What are they?
Shot-loaded whips are whips with shot in them, platted into the belly to make them heavier. I really don't think you need a shot-loaded whip myself. I made dozens of them, but I really don't think you should need a shot-loaded whip. If the whip is made properly, it'll fall good without having shot in it.
And we talked before, you made whips for people like Sydney Kidman.
Yeah, well, we made whips for all Kidman's, well, I say all Kidman stations, but a hell of a lot of Kidman stations we used to make for. Well, I suppose in the heyday we supplied nearly all over Australia, like, as far as we weren't the only ones supplying, but we sent whips to, I think, just about every cattle station in Australia at the time, you know.
Did you ever meet Kidman?
No, I didn't meet Kidman. He was really a bit before me, Kidman. He was still around when I was around, but before I started whip making, I worked for Kidman out at Jepp's Cross on the stock as a drover. And I seen him. He used to come out to the cattle sales, but I never met him. I didn't meet him. But what I seen of him, he was a very quiet sort of a person, and a very what would I say? He never swore or anything like that, you know. And yes, he was. He appeared to me to be a gentleman. Yes.
What about when it comes to, like, we talked about the fact that you made whips for people overseas? On the American movie scene, you made whips for people over there?
Oh yeah, lots. I made the whips for all the movies that were made here, like the Overlanders and all those, and I made whips for Peter Finch, and Peter Finch come out to my place when I was living at Paraka, and when they were making the film, and Johnny Cadell brought him out there, and I made whips for Peter Finch, and I made it for Maureen O'Hara. She was in the film too, and Robert Mitchum and all those fellas.
You've also exported some overseas to the people over in Hollywood.
Yes, I sent lots of whips over to America, to a fella, mostly to whip cracking experts over there. And there was one fella in particular,
Alex Green.
Who?
Alex Green.
Yeah, that's right, Alex Green, yeah. Alex was, he was a fellow that stood in for everyone in the pictures. If there was a whip required or a whip man required, Alex was the bloke that they got to do it, and they would dress him up as a Mexican or whatever it had to be at that time. But he was the bloke who done all the stand-ins, and a lot of the film stars like Charles Bronson and yes, and a lot of them, they all got wrapped in these whips, and they all sent over for whips, and they've got whips hanging on their wall, you know. But yeah, there was a lot of them.
Not bad for a lad from Paraka.
And there was another lady from America, I forget names now, but she was she's a whip cracking expert too, and she used to, that's what she done. And she used to put on shows and all the rest of it, and I made all her whips for her. And when we went for a tour to America, and it was a trotting tour for trotting people, you know. And when she knew that we were going to be there, she's arranged to meet us. She lived in San Miguel, which is in San Francisco, just out of San Francisco apparently. And anyway, her and her husband come one night and picked us up and took us to dinner. And oh boy, they took us to this place, this restaurant, and it was way up the top of this big building. And they booked the table, and they had the table right in, it was like a bay window, and they had the table in this bay window, and you could look over and see all the Golden Gate Bridge all lit up. It was something that you never forget, you know.
Well, particularly for a fellow who started out as a whip maker.
Yeah, that's right. It was a bit, really, I was a bit out of my course, I think, but...
I think you were very well. When it comes down to the likes of the master whip makers, how many do you reckon are still going?
Oh, I wouldn't think any of them are still going. Well, I know that, like Henderson, he's been gone a long time. There was another one in Melbourne. He was a good whip maker too. I just can't bring his name up. Jack Kramer. I don't think Jack's going anymore. And they were really the master whip makers at the time. And a few more, but more to it. Gone too. Oh, poor old John.
We talked one day about Alex Scobie.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's a hard thing to describe, I suppose. But you've got to. You just pick up your skin and trim it and cut a belly out. I always use plaited bellies. Cut your belly out and then cut your whip out and plait your belly, and away you go. But there's more to it than that, I suppose. But that's about the basics of it, you know. But I don't know of anybody else who cuts out their whips with their thumbnail. So I use a thumbnail to guide. When I cut out,
yeah.
All I use is a knife and a thumbnail, and that's what I was taught. You know, when I went into the trade, and old Norm was the same, and his father was a whip maker, and he was the same. And all the professional whip makers of the time, that's the way they cut the whip out, because it was quick.
Yeah.
It was good and it was quick.
Well, when it comes down to making a whip, we talk about 8 strand, 5. What is the combination of strands of a whip?
Well, you generally always make your whip so it's even. Like you use 8, 12, 16, 24, 32, and that gives you even strands, you know. We made a lot of whips years ago, like a lot of 24 strands, but I don't think the leather we get now is quite good leather, but you'd be battling to be cutting 24 strand out of them now. Yeah.
You've also made a whip for the Queen?
Yeah, I made a whip for the Queen when she was here, and she was very young at the time. I think, well, I don't know, I think she was married, but I don't know. But she was very young, and they wanted something to present to the Queen apparently, and then RM come to me and asked about it, and he said, it doesn't matter how long it takes you or whatever, he said, just make the best you can make.
Well,
so we did.
The other thing is, when you see a person carry a whip, would you be able to, at a glance, be able to tell whether a person can use a whip like
yeah,
that? Yeah,
my word. Yeah. It makes my heart bleed sometimes when I see these fellas, you know, they carry it and they you can see straight away they don't even know how to carry the whip, let alone crack it, you know. And those fellas come here and buy whips and they say, you know, can I try it out? And I say, yeah. And straight away you think, boy, oh boy, there's a good whip going to waste, you know.
How do you carry a whip?
Well, you won't notice the stockman will always carry his whip with the over his arm. He'll have the handle hanging over his arm like, and the whip hanging down, and he'll always have hold of the tail, the fall of the whip, so it's not dragging on the ground. And he'll always be like that. And if he's on a horse, sometimes he might even have it on his shoulder, have the handle over his shoulder, but he'll still have the fall in his hand, so that the horse is not walking all over the back of the tail of the whip.
And what about cracking the whip?
Oh, well, that's something that's like everything else. It's only practice. It comes to you with practice. And the feel, you've got to get a feel of the whip. If you get a feel of the whip, once you've got a feel of the whip, you're right. You know, you can do things with it and crack it properly and that, but it's like everything else. It's only practice.
You mentioned before Johnny Cadell.
Yeah.
Now, he was a fairly good player himself.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. Yeah, Johnny made a nice whip. Pardon me.
That's right. And he was working with the Mounted Police in Adelaide.
That's right. Yeah, he was. He worked for the police for quite a while too, John did. And he was a very good buck jump rider too, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was quite good.
That's okay. The other thing is we've looked at the
he was a good buck jump rider, John, and he made a nice whip too. Mm-hmm. But he's gone too, poor old John.
We talked one day about Alex Scobie.
Yeah.
Now you taught Alex the Platte?
No, I didn't teach Alex the Platte. No, I didn't. Well, I heard of Alec and I've heard of his whips. And while I was up at R.M. Williams, I'm not sure of this, but I think Alec brought his wife down here to the hospital for some reason, and it was the first time that Alec had ever been to Adelaide. And he used to come out to R.M. Williams in the day and spend the day with us when we was making whips, and that's where I first met Alec. And he was amazed that we had to make 4 whips a day to make a quid, you know. And I think it used to take Alec about a fortnight to make a whip or something like that, you know. But he was a very nice fella, and when he went back up home again, he used to write down to R.M. Williams, and I'd pick him out 6 or 8 skins, and they'd send them up to him, and when he was for his whips, you know.
When you say pick out a skin, when you looked at a hide or skin, what were you looking for?
Well, the best skin for a whip is a blue doe, a nice blue doe, because the leather is finer. It hasn't got very many scars on it. When you get the bucks, they've all been fighting and they got scars on them and whatever, you know, and the leather is much coarser, very coarse grained.
So we're talking about kangaroo hide?
Yeah, that's right. But the best leather is a nice fine blue doe. Beautiful, beautiful leather.
Well, we also see whips made like, what's a green hide whip?
Well, a green-eyed whip is what they, well, I suppose a green-eyed and a raw-eyed, you'd have to say the same. Red-eyed whips are different, but a rawhide whip is made out of exactly rawhide, and rawhide in its natural state, or before you soak it, is like a piece of galvanised iron, and you've got to chuck it in a tub of water for a day or two, and then it comes out like a heap of tripe. You cut your whip out of that while it's all soft and whatever, and work it while it's soft. And that's the only way you can work it. And when I first went into when I say I first went in the trade, I suppose it was a bit after, we were still making bullock whips. There were still bullock teams, and we were still making bullock whips. And I can remember one, I'll never forget it, that we made a heap of these bullock whips. They were shocking things to make, you know. We made a heap of these bullock whips. We had them on order, and we finished them on a Friday night, and we hung them all up in the rafters and put a brick on each one to stretch them out and let them settle down, you know. And when we come in Monday morning, they were all on the ground. There was the rats had gone along and chewed all the keepers. Chewed the keepers off all of them. And of course they weren't any good, and we had to make them again, but I'll never forget them.
Well, how long was a bullock whip? How long was it?
Oh, a bullock whip was always 8 to 10 foot. Yeah, they were long ones. And they had a handle about 5 foot. 5 foot each. Yeah, about 5 foot the handle. Big handle on them. And a lot of it was a two-handed job. You couldn't use it one hand. You had to use two hands. But a lot of the old bullockies were good with them too. They could use them.
What do you use for your handles in the whips?
I use cane. We used to use a lot of what they call a steel line handle years ago, but that was a steel line handle was plaited all the way from top to bottom, whereas the cane is plaited 3/4 way. But steel line handles I never really went for them in a big way, because they were temporary sort of things, you know. They were, what we had to do was we had to split the cane in halves, make a groove on either half, and put a piece of spring steel in the middle, and glue it all up, and then you had to shave it off with a plane. Yeah, they were all right, and they worked to a certain degree, but they weren't. A good cane handle would actually last you all your life.
What was the average length of it? What's a good length for a stockwhip?
Well, I always reckon 6 foot, 6'6". That's what I reckon. I wouldn't go any further than that. But there's a lot of people who like them 7 foot and 8 foot and whatever. But as you get them too long, they become too unwieldy, and 9 times out of 10 they're dragging under the horse's feet and so forth. But you get a good 6 foot, 6'6". It's a good yard whip. It's a good whip on a horse. To me, that's the ideal.
I spoke to you once before about Johnny and Vi Brady, who were a cabaret act that toured the world called the Australians. You made their whips?
I made whips for John. Yeah, I made whips for John. I haven't seen him for a while now, but I made whips for John. Yeah, and I made whips for the lady that run the Soul Brothers, not Soul Brothers. Yeah, Ashton Circus. Yeah, I made whips for her. She was quite good. She could crack a whip. Yeah, I made whips for her. I made whips for a lot of people, a lot of different ones and whatever. But Johnny was good, and I think his wife was better. But Johnny was good too. He was a good whip cracker.
What was the story about the Bradys?
Well, what do you mean?
They were with Skewthorpe's.
Yeah, well, he was with Skewthorpe, Johnny was, and Vi was Skewthorpe's daughter. I'm pretty sure I'm right here. Vi was Skewthorpe's daughter, and Johnny was working in the Skewthorpe Rodeo show, and they got married, and they went to the whip cracking act then, and Johnny and Vi went all over the world whip cracking, and Johnny used to do an act with a horse too. He trick riding and all that sort of thing. Yeah, he was quite good, John. Yeah.
Well, what about were there placking competitions or judging?
No. Oh, there was, I suppose, but you could put it in the Royal Show. You could put one in the Royal Show and it'd go in with, or craft or something like that, I suppose, in the craft division or something, but I never done that. I never put anything in the show. But there may have been some whip making competitions or something too, but I'd never heard of them.
Yeah. What about nowadays? People come to you with whips to be repaired. What's the common thing that breaks down on whips?
Well, most times is the last 2 feet of them get into trouble because they build them on the ground or they let a horse walk on them or whatever. But if they've looked after it and kept a bit of grease on it and one thing and another, I can splice some new leather in there and splice it in and run it out, and you would never know that that it wasn't a new whip. But that's the part that gets into trouble, the last couple of foot of the whip where they build it on the ground and whatever.
What's the hardest whip you've ever made?
Oh, I don't know what would be the hardest. We did make some hard ones years ago, different ones, that specialty ones, but
when you say specialty, what do you mean?
Well, someone would come to you and say, well, one of the circus people did, I remember years ago, they wanted one about 20 foot long, and I finished up making it for them, but that's a hell of a job because for one thing, you can't get a 20 foot whip out of one skin.
Yeah.
You've got to use 2 or 3 skins, and what you've got to do is you've got to splice if you're using 12 or 16 strands, when you come to the end of one lot, you've got to splice another lot in, and you've got to do that 2 or 3 times, and that's a hell of a job.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a job.
Well,
yeah.
We're now looking at like today's world. Stock whips are still used quite a lot.
Well, I think they. I don't know about on stations. I don't think they're used much on stations, but stock whips are apparently now. I think they're an in thing. What would I say? They're in favour or whatever.
Fashion.
Yeah, they're in fashion, and a lot of people have them and hang them on the wall. A lot of people have them and just play with them, But another thing that's drawn it now is that they do have whip cracking competitions, and they have a lot of them apparently. Nearly all the rodeos now, they have whip cracking competitions and whatever. And I think that's what's keeping the whip business going. But they're more of a novelty thing now than they are used on the stations. There are not many blokes on the stations can use them.
Well, when
motorbikes.
Well, when they used a stock whip, what was its primary use?
Well, on stations, it was used like it was an everyday tool, because the blokes that used it they were either drovers, and they had it in their hand all their waking hours, or they were like mustering cattle and cutting cattle and all that sort of thing, which they used them all the time. But now, with helicopters and motorbikes, whips, become an obsolete sort of thing.
People may get the idea that whips were actually used to hit the animal. More often than not, it was mainly a noise factor.
That's right. Yeah, it was more the noise factor, I think, than the hitting part of it. But I think if an old pike had got running loose, they'd drop a couple on him. But no, I think it was more the noise factor that they were used for.
Well, when it comes to making like the cracker, how is that made?
Well, I always make my crackers out of cotton. I couldn't explain it to you how I make them. I could show you, but I couldn't explain it. and they're twisted up. And to me, cotton is the best you can get. But as you mentioned a bit earlier, like chappies with whips now use binder twine. They thin out a bit of binder twine and twist it up and use it. But I think it's better than nothing, because you shouldn't use your whip with nothing on it. That you shouldn't do that. You should always have some sort of a cracker, whatever. But I think the cotton is the best go.
What about care of a whip? What's the best way to care for a whip?
Just keep it greased. Like, keep a bit of grease on it. Don't let it get dry. Don't let the leather get to the point where it's that dry it nearly cracks. Even just mutton fat is as good as any. If you get mutton fat from around the kidney of a sheep, and put that on, and if it's a warm day, leave it out in the sun for a while, it'll soften up. Rub that on, and it's as good as anything.
Well, when a person buys a whip, how do they break a whip in?
Well, you break it in just by using it. If you use it, it'll break in. That's all it needs, really, is just to use it for a little while, and it'll break in. Yeah.
Over the years, you've seen a lot of whips made by other people. Now, I remember bringing you a whip a long time ago, and I said, this is an Alex Scobie. And you told me the whip had been made by his son, but the handle had been made by Alex Scobie himself. How did you know the difference?
Well, there's one of Alex's sons. I don't know the man, but there's one of them that makes whips, and he makes it. Alex Scobie's whip was always, you could pick it a mile away, because he had the same plaits in it. He would use one plait to go 15, 18 inches down, and then he would go ordinary, and then he would use another plait a little bit further down, and he'd done that in every whip he made.
When you say one plait then another plait, what's the difference in plaits?
Well, there's lots of different plaits you can use, and Alec used it wasn't what we call a Senate. A Senate plait is 1/1. Like it's what would I say? It's just like over under all the way, and it takes a long time. Like it's slow, a lot slower than ordinary platen, but it's very effective and very good. And you can have double Senate or triple Senate or whatever. But Alec used the same plait on every whip he made, so his whips were not very hard to distinguish.
Well, where did when it comes down to the terms like you're saying, the Senate plait, etc., what is the origin of all these plaits?
Well, I don't know. The Stockwhip is, I suppose, it originated in a sense from England. There was whip makers in England, but they didn't make anything like our Stockwhip. They made they were hunting sort of whips and coach whips, for coach drivers and that sort of thing. But they were only 4-6 plait at the most. That's about all. And they were very much like the belly we put in our whip. It was only a little, thin sort of a whip. But I suppose that's where it originated. I don't know. But really, the Stockwhip is an Australian thing for sure.
You mentioned before about that you would always be able to tell a person if they could use a whip by the way they carried it. Was there sort of like an unwritten etiquette on whip handling?
Well, I don't know about an unwritten etiquette, but all the old fellas, all the old bushmen, the real bushmen, real drovers and stockmen, they could all use a whip, and they all, if you went to them and said, lend us your whip, they wouldn't lend you the whip, because they sort of treasured the whip, and it was their whip, and they looked after it, and they didn't want you messing it up. And that was a trait that went right through the stockmen and the drovers. Well, that's you. It was the same with other gear that they used too, and they looked after it and took a pride in it, but there's no pride today.
How long can a stockwhip last a person?
Well, it could last you all your life if you looked after it and you knew how to use it. That's the big key, if you knew how to use it. There was an old chappie worked down there at Jepp's Cross. His name was Louis Lewitsky, and he worked when they had the cattle ring going. All the cattle used to go through the ring. There's a big ring down there. I don't know if you've ever seen it. And all the buyers would be seated up around this like a big arena, and the cattle would go in. We put in twos and threes and ones and so forth, and the buyers would buy them. Well, Louis was behind this gate that went into the ring, and every beast that went in, it passed him. And he used to have to keep pushing these beasts up so that the head stockman could draft out what he wanted and end the ring. So he would probably handle 2,000 or 3,000 a week. And I made him a whip, and he brought it to me for the last time, I reckon a few years ago now, but he had that whip that I know of for about 35 years, and he worked it like hell, but he could use it, and he looked after it. You couldn't, no one ever got it, or he wouldn't lend it to you or anything else, and if it was a wet day, he'd always grease on it. So they can last you if you look after them. It lasts you a long time.
Bill Millowick, what do you see as the future of whip making? Is it going to become just a hobby thing for people, or does it have a real place?
No, I really think that the heyday of whip making is gone, because I don't think. See, we used to supply all the stations, and as I say, the stations now I don't think they use whips. I think they use helicopters and motorbikes and a bit of polypipe and whatever. But I think this fad that they got now with whip cracking competitions and all that sort of thing, it'll keep going a while, I suppose, and whatever, But I think the heyday's gone.
Bill Millowick, master whip maker. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to you. Thank you very much for talking with me.
Thank you very much.